Joel, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Joel Tan, Director of Community Engagement at YBCA. And I wanted to first acknowledge really the panelists and Mary and Wayne and Jessica and everybody who made this happen, and usually thank, but it's amazing to me that people, that other artists and art lovers want to discuss art and want to geek out this way, and it's so neat. So thank you. So I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna show and tell. So maybe we can run that first video, and I'll maybe start with the story of how I came onto this panel, because I resisted it the entire time. I had this invitation. As soon as I got the invitation for Dance Discourse Project and saw the topic is the presenting model static, I immediately ran to my colleague Angela, who I've worked with for the last 6.5 years and has been able to skillfully now manage to find a way to deal with my hysteria. So with that, she assures me, Jessica assures me, and I'm going to show you a little bit of one of the things that I do, and it's Big Idea Night. And I wonder if you can run that first video with DIYBCA. This was, this video that you're looking at was filmed last August, and it was not filmed, is this the DIY? It was not filmed, yeah. This is not filmed by YBCA staff, but it was actually something we found the day after a Big Idea Night. I don't know if you, who's here who's been to a Big Idea Night? Awesome, great. Big Idea Night is a semi-regular, somewhat quarterly event happening, art party that we throw at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, which is part open house, part art party, part showcase, and mostly user-generated, user designed. And so this night in particular, this is DIYBCA in conjunction with our Big Idea DARE, which is innovation in audiences and just innovation and interaction. In addition to that, we have had, around at this time, we have this amazing first part of an exhibition around audiences, exhibition on audiences, and we had this thing. So maybe we can play it. So this is something that was generated by an attendee. Oh. It was working during the test. Let's go to the next one. The people. Well, the cool thing about this was that an audience member, and we didn't expect it. So these Big Idea Nights usually bring in anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 people into our space, and what you're looking at is a drinking and dancing competition that we brought from the lab, and that happened in the forum, and out in the lobby we had Mrs. Vera and her crew doing a DIY drag thing where everybody brought in their leftover crap from 99-cent stores, and they all redesigned shoes, handbags, etc. In addition to that, like what you're seeing now, you're seeing the open house aspect. People are in the galleries looking at work, dealing with design, custom tailored. Oh, this is the Nipe Art one, yeah. Where we were looking at crowdsourcing, we were looking at like tailored work by consumers, and so we created what I'm calling the vernacular around not only that exhibition, but the Big Idea itself. So the point of drinking and dancing is that you're supposed to incorporate the drinking with the dance. So there was a contest. So more than anything, I can talk about how these events are meant to really bring in different kinds of audiences to YBCA. And so we program our audiences as much as we program our artists. And I'll talk a little bit about what makes my kind of programming different from, let's say, Angela's. All right, cool. Can we bring it to half light and then maybe have the people one playing just with us? I wanted to show another video, and as I talk a little bit more about YBCA, and I wanted to address this issue of, are we in a static presenting model? I want to go back to, again, kind of my awkwardness, or I guess even my queerness, the initial queer feeling I had about this, because I thought, well, I'm not a presenter necessarily. I program work, I curate work, but it really got me to think about the difference between what I do and what my colleagues do, who are curators. The director of visual arts, Betty Sue Hertz, our film programmer and curator, Joel Shepard, and Angela. We started doing these big idea nights from this Wallace Foundation grant that we've gotten, and I started these big idea nights 2 years ago. And they've been steadily successful in terms of audiences and bringing in different kinds of audiences. But in terms of how we curate, in many ways, one thing I think about is the audiences we want to bring in that I'd already mentioned in context to the work that we're already presenting. But at another level, I think when I first started this, I'd envisioned something like beyond that, where I just kind of looked at our grand lobby and looked at all the spaces, everything from our elevators to our bathrooms, and I just thought to myself, how can we make this look and feel more like an art center? Can we play that second one? The second video I just wanted to show in the background is, the first one was DIY BCA, but I think a few months before that we worked with an arts, dance, music, and art collective, The People, from Oakland. And again, another independent group came in, Yak Films, amazing, amazing film crew that does dance films. They also generated work around this, because I wanted to show you just what this stuff looks like. Is it? All right. So, I guess if I were just to answer the question around the static presentation model, I don't know if it addresses it directly, but I guess I would have to just comment on the nature of YBCA, which is, I'll go back to that same anchoring word, but my word is queer. And I want to use queer in the most open sense, and not just around sexuality. But our mid-size, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary nature makes us already kind of a strange animal. We're not just a presenting house, we're not just an exhibition space, we're not just a film program, and we don't even have education necessarily, we have community engagement. And this is The People who you'll see. Again, multimodal, amazing photographers. Mirror One was doing live painting. So, and just a few months before that, we had all of the folks from Mime Troupe who were in here. Totally other different crowd, right? And before that, we had the sisters who were in here and who brought lots of different kinds of audiences into the organization. So what I'm trying to get at is our very queerness has to do with the diversity even within our organization. We have a director that has an absolute love and passion and dedication to innovation and in the new, in the different. And I'll say this about Ken Foster. He was formerly a theater director, and I think that I can actually see also how he runs the organization, because the diversity he created in terms of the different kinds of curating and programming that happens results not only in diversity, but in a real dynamic, and it's dynamic, a dynamic environment where these very differences in the multifaceted nature of who we are has, I think, created multiple levels of entry into the organization, different uses of space, over time. And I think a buzz that's kind of just grown organically, and that ranges, that buzz, whatever that is. But nevertheless, I think it's our collective strength and really our queerness that gives us kind of a unique element of who we are. And just the fact that I feel like I work with some of the most amazing professionals I've ever run into in the arts or otherwise helps. And the fact that we are so different. Like when I say dynamic, it's not like everybody just has, you know, great ideas and cool ideas. And this takes, you know, there's real fire that happens when something is kind of birthed or jettisoned out of us. So this is, these are some visual examples of this. And then maybe just the last one, if you wouldn't mind just starting to show that. I wanted to show this. This is the amazing stuff that happened with the people. And then just, lastly, I just wanted to go back to our very, very first big idea night, which was on June 9th. Oh, we don't have time for that. I'll just stop there. Thank you so much. All right.
Things that I'm obsessing about are the fact that the percentage of the population that is Asian and Latino is going to be even greater than it is now, and a majority very, very soon, if not now, right? So what does that suggest about what we do here as people who are concerned with providing experiences in the arts for the communities that live here in the Bay Area? Very, very into that. Wealth gap, continuing to get bigger in the Bay Area, right? As well as everywhere else. What are the implications of that? I think these are things we should be very much concerned with and thinking about. The percentage of people under the age of 20 and over the age of 60 is increasing as a proportion of our population as well. Again, very different. I know like the sexy people right now that everyone wants to have in their audiences are like under 35, like 18 to 35 or something like that, but that's going to be an increasingly small proportion of the people who are actually here. So again, what does that suggest for us as we're thinking through when and how we do our work? And for me, what we're supporting at the foundation that I work at. And so the next question is, how do the people who live here actually want to engage with the arts? What do they want to do? I think it's an important question. Not just from a marketing perspective, but from a very substantive perspective. If we really care about giving people things that move them, that make them ask really deep, profound questions about their existential ideas. Like, if we are really concerned with that kind of relevancy, I think, again, we have to consider how people want to actually go about engaging with the art that we want to share with them as artists, as presenters, as administrators, as funders. So the great news is that we're increasingly learning about this. These are questions that funders are increasingly giving smart people money to go find out about. And I think there are also questions that people in the field are engaging in a more substantive and I think explicit way, in a more public way than they have before. So I'm sure many of you may be familiar with Alan Brown's work a report he did for the Irvine Foundation about different modes of engagement and practices that are happening in the Central Valley and the Inland Empire. And you know, whether or not you agree with analyses or summary findings, I think what's really interesting to observe is the fact that we increasingly have more information about the fact that people don't just want to sit and watch something happen. That there are a lot of other ways that people are engaged with creative practice, a very broad idea, that wouldn't happen in a place that just had a proscenium stage and that would only happen from 8 to 10 p.m. on certain days of the week. So again, if what we care about is less, look at this great stuff I have, let me give it to you, which is one thing, and that's totally valid. But if we also care about who's here, how they're being engaged, and whether or not they feel like that's something that speaks to them, I think these are questions, again, that we have to really seriously consider as makers, as funders, as administrators. I think there's also the question of where things happen, which speaks to the point of the proscenium stage. And Maria Rosario Jackson, another researcher, again, kind of a geek with data and reports and whatnot, has done a lot of work with her urban planning hat on, but particularly thinking about where arts and cultural experiences happen in communities. And this gets to my third question, which is a question that she proposed at Grantmakers in the Arts panel that she spoke on last October in Chicago. And I was just like, whoa, this is fascinating. She brought up this idea of a cultural kitchen. And the metaphor being that if you go to a potluck, where you share a dish with someone, you have to have a kitchen in which to make that dish that you bring to the potluck. And that kitchen is a place for experimentation, it's a place for collaboration, it's a place for taste testing, it's a place to figure out what it is you want to share. And so the metaphor then was, if the cultural commons is a place that we really care about, say in an urban context, since we're in San Francisco for right now, where are the cultural kitchens in our communities? Who's being supported to experiment, to create, to taste things, to come in and out, and to have those open kitchens where art is getting created, where ideas are being generated. And then, when it comes to the commons, who's setting the table? What shape is it? I like the shape, I threw that one in there. Who gets invited to participate, right? And in what context is that happening? So this gets to the other question, but I'm kind of interested in the prequel, which is, where's stuff getting made? So I throw these as open questions, again, to folks in the audience, because I'd be really interested to know, again, my funder hat on, like, what are the cultural kitchens that you see? Because I think a lot of this activity is very invisible to someone like me who sits and tries to figure out where to make grants, because this isn't all happening under a 501c3 structure. So the last question then is, how would I, as a funder, how would we, as people who care and have resources to share, go about supporting this work? How would we get grants to people performing drag in the nightlife? How do we ensure that work doesn't have to be decontextualized in order to give it validity or to support it with resources? And then the question that I asked, too, is how would giving resources potentially distort or change the dynamics in what is happening in communities? Because I think that's a very important thing to consider. So I will leave all those big, fun questions out there hanging, and we can all jump in or just sit and think. Whatever feels good. Thanks.
Thank you. Wow, that was a lot to take in. And I think that I had some questions prepared, but I feel like also the panelists have posed some interesting questions. And I happen to know, because I invited you, that there are some very smart people in the audience as well. So would anyone like to, is it okay, Mary, if we just put it up?
Go for it.
Does anyone want to jump in there and either answer one of the questions that Ron or one of the other panelists has posed, or ask a question of your own?
There's a microphone waiting for you. In fact,
Right
there were
here,
three.
yeah.
There's even an extra one.
Yeah.
Force it on someone. Well, Ron, I was really inspired by one of the
Hold the
questions.
microphone up to your mouth.
Sure. I was really inspired by one of the questions that you asked, and have been thinking about one of these questions in a different sort of term. And this issue of, as a grant writer, how can you create grants or opportunities for folk settings, a drag setting, a bomba setting, you know, the work that's going on in underground communities. I'm a part of the electronic music community. So how can we support those things? How do we access them? And then, as somebody who is committed in working in those communities, but also committed to providing those things in an atmosphere where it's going to have a greater impact, like a theater. So I've been thinking about the complications of those two things. So I am committed to having money and resources and presenting in venues that build prestige and create accessibility and have my work be seen by more people. So in order to do that, right now in this current model, I have to write a lot. Yet, as a movement-based artist, what excites me is finding new and unusual and articulate ways of moving and interacting with music. That takes time in the laboratory. It also takes time, because I am a folk artist, drawing inspiration from electronic music and just spending time dancing in a community of 200, 300 people. I have to spend time there too. Yet, here I am writing and writing and writing because I need money, because I want other people to say, yes, she's doing a good thing, go look at her work. I'm writing so much that I feel that sometimes I'm spending more time writing than actually in the laboratory. And so I guess I wanted to just present that as an issue, I think, that's presented by this current model. yes, we do want resources because then we can have a greater impact. And, you know, how do we deal with learning this other language that we have to learn in order to get those resources and still maintain our own practice? So, I don't know, maybe I just raised another meaty topic.
Yeah, does anyone on the panel want to speak to that?
I would just say a few things. Thank you for sharing the questions. One is, you kind of mentioned in speaking the idea that certain venues give legitimacy. That could, I will impute, lead to funding, potentially. I think part of our work as funders is to deconstruct our own ideas about what is legitimate and what deserves funding and deserves support. And I think we have some really wonderful organizations that help us climb that learning curve, like Answers Group, and like the Theater Bay Area Cash Program, for example, which is a fairly kind of quick turnaround, small grants program for artists who want to create, that doesn't have a lot of the barriers that we as funders are often well known for setting up. We have organizations like Lily's organization, ACTA, the Alliance for California Traditional Arts, that is supporting work in communities, supporting folk work and traditional art. So I think that increasingly there are intermediary organizations, as we often call them, that have this kind of expertise to not decontextualize work and to be able to meet people where they are and to not have people flying off into writing in languages that don't make sense to them when they should be moving. But I think it's also incumbent on us still, as people who sit in the ivory towers that we inhabit, to deconstruct our ideas as well, such that that learning trickles up, for better or worse. That's the direction, I think, in many respects. So that's the thing. And Jessica posed a little question to me over email, and then I'll toss it to the
I was about to toss that question at you.
Do you want to state the question? Because I don't
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of my prepared questions for Ron was just saying, you know, if you were to develop a radical new initiative that would decentralize artistic support to infuse these non-traditional venues and projects with funding, what would that look like?
My answer is I don't know, but something that I think is really interesting. I can't remember the name of the site, but there's a website that teachers can go to and apply for quick turnaround grants for classroom materials. They don't even have to fill out a grant application. You say, I need this much money, yes, right? And it's up to like $500, or it's not a very large amount, right? Right?
Philanthropic Ventures Foundation, just to get that on the record.
Thank you. I'm really bad with names and things. So I think that's a great idea, personally. I don't know, we'd have to think about, you know, what's the amount that would make the most sense to actually be useful, but it'd be great to just be able to apply every so often to a revolving fund where you say, I need $1,000 to do this thing. Wonderful, right? And we have some of those kinds of things, creative capacity funds, and folks can mention them, that are fairly quick turnaround. But this idea of not having to write anything, really, just I send something in, I get the money. That would be really great, right? That'd be great. So I think we can also, as funders, to be more creative in thinking about other mechanisms for investment. So there's not a Kickstarter that gets born every day, but I didn't see a lot of grantmakers really jumping on the wagon to support that vehicle, which has now led to a lot of projects and individual artists being able to fundraise for themselves outside of a grant writing system and structure. So I think there are also ways in which we could be thinking much more broadly about ways we can support artists that aren't direct grants, even though I know that is very important, but that can create other opportunities that are often generated that we wouldn't come up with ourselves. So other folks want to jump on that? Get to dream a little?
I have a question more about the presenting model and how we're able to unravel not only audience expectations of when something is going to happen and how it's going to happen, but also how we unravel artists' expectations. And, you know, so for so long, artists have kind of, well, I'm not going to say all artists, but certain artists that I've come across have kind of seen, oh, I need to have something that looks like a season, and then I really have like made it, or then I'm really legitimate. So that's one part, and I think the other part of it for me is I would like to hear examples from anyone in the room, successful presentations where there's been like an increase in visibility as well as kind of multiple streams of revenue. So not just a foundational grant. When you have a free performance, it's free. You know, you don't have people giving. So it was just, those are the two things that I was interested in.
Well, is there somebody in the audience who wants to respond to that? I know everybody, I know we're all kind of doing the same work, so there's this group up here, but I know everybody is pulling work together here in this room. But I think that one thing when I was at the foundation that we kind of tried to encourage people and support really is this idea of like building your individual donor base. And how do artists do that? Like, because if we pass around a hat, we'll get some money. Like, we'll get money. You'll get, you know, you could probably get, you know, $50 tonight, you know, for your work. But so I think it's just about kind of building that confidence and having those conversations with each other about like, well, your work, I get, you know, as an individual that your work is worth that much, but then like, how is it that you show up to do that and ask for that money because and allow yourself to do that. And that's one thing that my group is kind of grappling with, because we had a fundraiser this one day in the back of some Mexican restaurant on 24th Street in this like patio that's not used often, Casa Sanchez, they're great. And we walked away with $1,700, like, because we let people know what we were doing. Like, we're like, you know, we're really like not trying to go on a fancy vacation. Like, we're trying to record a CD, which is a revenue builder, right? And so how can we let people know so that they have something tangible to latch onto, and then how, as administrators, not only artists, but administrators do, because that's what you are. As an artist, you're an administrator to a certain degree, unless you have some luxury of having a nice wife or husband or somebody who loves you who's gonna like do that for you, which some people have, God bless them, but a lot of us don't, you know, and so we have to be the administrator and the artist. So how do you capture those names, engage those people through and act like a small institution? And I think that one thing that I you know, it's sometimes challenging to find the institution that fits your work as well to present your work. And I think that's a question I have about, you know, what kind of venues do we need for electronica music or for whatever work you're doing, and how do we engage with builders, community development people, or with funders or fellow artists to create those spaces. We just lost one recently, right? Mama Calizos. And so what do we need to do to recreate that? I also just want to hit that from a presenter standpoint. In the presenting community, I feel like there's this sort of idea that non-traditional performance venues and these alternative events are great, but really the value is that they're going to get people to want to pay to come and see a show at 8 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night. So the value then keeps coming back to this traditional practice that we've identified that is revenue generating, right? And the other practices are used to feed that practice. And I think that's something that I'd really like to explode. But you're right, you know, to put on a free event, you need some other source of income, and then we're looking towards funders to provide that. And I think, you know, how can we get creative outside of those two models?